Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, October 13. It's 10:45 p.m. on the East Coast. It is 8:45 in Wyoming. I hope you are enjoying your mid-semester break. I know you're off today and tomorrow from your classes. Um, I finally got to the Chomsky chapter, so I'm putting this out to you. This is the last chapter for exam 2, which you will take next week. So the exam will cover Piaget to Chomsky. We'll get to that at the end of the presentation. Welcome to another episode of Foundations of Development with Professor Denobili. So let's get started. So we're going to cover the three main concepts from Chomsky, from the Chomsky chapter. It's actually chapter 16, not 17. And the lecture's actually only going to cover until about slide 11. The rest of the presentation is for your own personal reading, when you're bored on a Saturday afternoon. And you have nothing better to do, you can read about linguistics. You're not going to be tested on it, but there's a lot of good stuff on there. It's also to show that like we could be here forever. I took a whole course in linguistics when I was in college. And so this is just the bare bone basics. We're not covering that much. Chomsky is here on our map. I'm honestly surprised of how far to the right he is, because he's very Rousseauian, he's very Darwinian, very Piagetian in nature, even though Piaget does have some criticisms of him. And so I would have seen him more on the organismic side, but this is where he's put on our map. And we're going to look at his, theory of language development, also known as linguistics. Here he is. He is our only living theorist that we are studying this semester. He's in his 90s. He's still around. He's still writing. He is a political gadfly. He writes about a lot of things, especially foreign diplomacy and foreign relations. I believe he has a degree in that as well. I highly recommend you read chapter 16. I've shared these two videos with you. A stand-up comedian, Brian Reagan, talks about how difficult the English language is. Some of you said you were a little bit stressed this week. That will definitely get you rolling in your seats. It is a hilarious stand-up routine. And this history of English in 10 minutes. I've used this in my class. Some parts are PG-13, but if you want to laugh and learn a little bit about the English language, I highly recommend the history of English in 10 minutes. It is by far one of the most hilarious videos I've heard about the English language. It's from the British perspective, but they talk about American English later on in the video. So let's get to this thing about the English language, but also how it fits with other spoken languages in the world. So Chinese is the number one most spoken language by population. And yes, we're collectivizing all of it because Mandarin is the main dialect, but any of the other dialects that are considered with under the umbrella of Chinese, we're including all of them. But by population in the world, Chinese is the most spoken. Second is Spanish. If we're including Spain, South America, Central America, the former Spanish colonies in the Caribbean, a very large Spanish-speaking community in the United States, and we sometimes forget about the Philippines. The Philippines was a major Spanish colony formerly, and even though Tagalog is also spoken in the Philippines, Spanish is still very much large Spanish speaking population in the Philippines. English comes in at third in our list, even though it's virtually everywhere. It is the language of academia around the world. Uh, and surprising in very surprising areas around the world. Um, when I was in college, we had many foreign exchange students who would come to our college, um, and I was surprised from some of the nations that they came from that they were also very fluent uh, in English. English is spoken everywhere, and in many cases, it is the language of academia. Um, Dr. Rousseau has this little note that it's virtually everywhere, including airplanes, because there's a lot of travel all around the world, and you need to know English if you're traveling between places. Hindu and Urdu in India and parts of Pakistan. Arabic is spoken in the Middle East, North Africa, parts of Asia. And I have to say, adding in here, Arabic is a fast growing population in the United States as well. Portuguese, Portugal, Brazil, Goa. Goa is a former colony of Portugal. Bengali clocks in at 7. Russia, excuse me. I haven't gotten a lot of sleep this week. I gotta get some sleep tonight. Russia clocks in at number 8, which at first I was surprised, and then I thought about it and not so surprised. So, reason why I'm not so surprised is because even though Russia first is a large country by landmass, not many people live there in relation to that landmass. Majority of Russians live on the European side of Russia. Not many people live in Siberia on the eastern side of Russia. And when you think of it historically, Russia never really had colonies in the traditional sense uh, of what we know of colonial history. So it's understandable, in my opinion, why they clock in this far down on the list. Then we have Japanese, um, Punjabi, which is spoken in parts of Pakistan, and parts of India. French, which is spoken in France, Canada. Excuse me. Our neighbors to the north have two official languages: French Canadian and English. In many cases, you will see their signs written in both languages. The Caribbean and in the Pacific, the former French colonies in the Pacific. By word count, however, English is the largest language. It makes it one of, if not the most complex language. And even though by word count, it's got the most words, it's complicated because it combines similar words into one. Here's an example. In Greek, there are 3 different words for love. Eros, familia, and I always forget the last one. But the whole point is this: you have erotic love, you have family love, and then you have the love of stranger, the love of man, the love of humanity. And so you have 3 separate words in Greek, but in the English language, there's only one: love. Well, the problem with love is that I can say, you know, I love my parents. I can say I love my students. If I had a wife, I could say I love my wife, but I don't mean the same thing. In those, I can also say I love this peanut butter macchiato, but I don't mean the same thing in each different instance, even though I'm using the same word. So English is the largest language by word count, and also because we actually we've borrowed words and Englishfied them. I don't even know what word I would be using for that. Uh, or maybe we could say anglified it, um, in order to make it an English word, even though they're actually words from other languages. So the English language is constantly borrowing and expanding from other languages in the creation of it. I want to share this with you. Lately, I haven't been playing the videos, but this is very short. So I want to share this video with you. It's the trailer to the film The Professor and the Madman. Um, here's one of Mr. DeNoblie's Saturday afternoon movies. If you so want to check it out. It's probably one of my favorite movies from the last few years. It came out in 2019. So here we go, The Professor and the Madman.
Inmate number 742, assigned to block 2.
We have been attempting to make this dictionary for the last 20 years, and I submit that the extraordinary, the unconventional, Mr. Murray, is the solution and our salvation.
The task is gigantic.
And impossible.
There is a way. We'll ask them to read in search of the words that we want and get them to write the word on a slip of paper. So this is the good doctor. I'm proud to make your acquaintance, sir. I cannot believe my eyes. Aye, partners, word for word. My entire life, all that I pursued has been in preparation for this. And you think I'm concerned? You do experience yourself as being under threat. I only read books. I'm gathering so far. We've only just started.
William Minor will be struck for all acknowledgements.
What are you so afraid of? The bad man can be redeemed.
Mr. Churchill!
If you believe that every individual life deserves its own chance, you must set him free or he will perish. And I read, I can fly out of this place on the backs of books. I've gone to the end of the world on the wings of fire. You're linked now, partners. An American and a Scot. One Oxford, one Yale, one brilliant, one mad. But which is which?
Mr. Murray, we are watching with a concerned eye.
Watch then, and be amazed.
So on the surface, The Professor and the Madman might not sound like a very interesting story. It's the story of how the Oxford English Dictionary became compiled. It does not sound like an interesting story on its surface, but I read the book, I saw the movie. The book is a very interesting psychological profile of um, both doctors, if you will. One was from Oxford, one was from Yale. They call it The Professor and the Madman, but what's interesting is they were both professors and they were both madmen. So we don't know which label is for whom, because one might have been clinically what we would have used to call clinically insane. Dr. Murray, who was the one who was leading the compiling of the English dictionary, he was mad in a different sense. He was very passionate about language, and he wanted to get it by any means necessary. It is a very thought-provoking, very haunting and horrifying at the same time uh, but it shows the importance of language and the importance of understanding language, and how language really is, from an educational point of view, uh, learning and understanding language is a type of freedom. It's a type of liberation. Even if you're in literal prison, it is a form of liberation. And sometimes all we got are words. So I highly recommend for you to see that movie if it's something that you find interesting. So yes, English is hard, but kids have this remarkable explosion of English speaking abilities at around age 2, and Chomsky continues to seek to explain it. I think that's one of the amazing things of the chapter. Many of our theorists start with their theory and they stick with it. Chomsky seems to constantly seek to revise it as much as he can all throughout his life. So he's not consistent in that sense. But I think what's important to know is that he's seeking to clarify and seeking to find new explanations. He's often referred to as the father of linguistics. He was born in Philadelphia in 1928. So he became the founder of cognitive science, which is in direct criticism of Skinner. Remember, Skinner was our behaviorist who said, if I can't see it, I can't study it. It doesn't exist. And Chomsky goes, but if kids are talking at age 2, something's going on inside their brain, and we have to find a way of measuring it. As I said before, you know, we're gonna focus on the 3 main concepts. I'll briefly, like, what exactly is language? There's many different ways to look at language. I personally think that language is a social cultural thing. It unites us as human beings, and its purpose is communication. But the thing is that when we think of what language is, it's more than just communication. Animals communicate with each other, but by the scientific definition of language, they don't have a language. They have a means of communicating. So, like insects and bugs, and even some animals, that they may have chemical communication processes in order to share information with each other. They may have vocal calls in that sense of like barks and things like that. But there is definitely something different about human beings and how we communicate with each other. Animals communicate instinctual messages to each other for the survival of their species. Our means of communication go beyond simple survival. And this is what Chomsky is talking about in terms of linguistics. There's a higher level of communication when we're talking about human language. I'm going to share this video because it's only a minute long. But it would help if you could see it, because you can't see it, even though I was playing it for you. Hold on. So this is a video about Chomsky. Here we go.
Language sets us apart. Other animals communicate, but they don't have anything approaching the sophisticated grammar of human languages. How is it that we learn to speak and think in language so easily? Young children become adept in a new language very quickly. Since the dawn of philosophy, thinkers have argued about whether or not we have innate ideas, whether we are born knowing things, as Plato believed, Or rather, as John Locke and other empiricists argued, the mind is a blank slate on which experience writes. An American linguist, Noam Chomsky, gave a twist to this debate in the 1960s by demonstrating that children learning to speak just don't have enough information to form the complex grammatical maneuvers that allow them to generate unlimited new and original sentences. Yet they do so with ease. There's a poverty of stimulus. Something else must be going on. Chomsky's hypothesis was that there are inborn structures in our brain, what he called a language acquisition device, or LAD, which gives us a natural propensity to organize the spoken language that we hear in various grammatical ways. Without that, we couldn't get started as language learners. If he's right, language structure is hardwired as a kind of universal grammar. Our slates have been written on before we emerge from the womb.
All right. So Chomsky's theory is rooted in biolinguistics. The structure of language is biologically determined in the human mind and hence genetically transmitted. That's why I feel like he should be a little bit closer to the left on our map, but all humans seem to share the same underlying linguistic and biolinguistic structures, irrespective of sociocultural differences. This is why, regardless of how civilizations lived over the centuries, when civilizations interact with each other, they can translate their languages. At some point, there is a translation of the languages in order for communication to happen. But even though words may be different, the biolinguistic structures of the languages are extremely similar enough that communication can happen. But it's also related to our vocal cords. I would also add here, I think it's more than just vocal cords, but it's also um, the relationship of the muscles within the mouth itself. So not only the vocal cords in your throat, but also your tongue and the surrounding muscles of the tongue. Why do I say this? When we think of accents, accents are caused by the tongue. We think accents are vocal. Accents are actually the ability for the tongue to stretch inside of the mouth, and therefore it affects how the air comes out of the throat and goes through the vocal cords. Um, that's why if you think of um, a native English speaker trying to speak Spanish and it sounds weird, because the tongue is stretched differently than a native Spanish speaker. An immigrant coming from another country to the United States, let's say, and is speaking English and it comes out weird, it's because the tongue is stretched differently. And therefore the sound coming through the vocal cords is going to sound differently. So I was always fascinated about that, especially when I was trying to learn French and Spanish in grammar school. Chomsky argues that language is a unique evolutionary development for the human species, unlike modes of communication used by any other animal species, as we saw in the video. And these are the three main topics of interest that I wanted to cover with you. We're like more than 3/4 of the way through the presentation. So here we go. That LAD, the language acquisition device, is the relevant difference lays in the capacity for humans that cats lack and other animals. One of the tasks for linguistics should be to determine what the LAD is and what constraints it imposes on the range of possible human languages. again, it's this system that's able to sort words out and to sort the rules out. And Chomsky kind of discovered, by the very least, that we're hardwired for it. That at very young ages we're able to determine grammatical structures, and that the universal features that would result from these constraints constitutes universal grammar. Excuse me. Universal grammar, the second concept, is syntactic knowledge that's partially inborn. Children need only learn certain parochial features of their native languages. But there is an enormous gap between linguistic stimuli and the rich linguistic knowledge they attain, the so-called poverty of the stimulus argument. While both the human baby and, say, a kitten are both capable of inductive reasoning, if they are exposed to exactly the same linguistic data, the human will always acquire the ability to understand and produce language, while the kitten will never acquire either ability. It will just sit there and mew and run away and go into a litter box. At least that's what I learned this weekend when I was house sitting. The kitten hissed at me every time I brought the food into the room. And I think I had a little bit of post-traumatic stress from when my grandmother's kitten bit me. Okay, I'm going off track. Hold on. Let's move on. Here we go. The third concept, transformative generative grammar. Children somehow acquire the ability to understand and produce an infinite number of sentences, including ones that have never before been uttered, and it suggests an innate linguistic capacity. I think this is also important when we look later on in the chapter, and he talks about how for alternative languages, even though the adults will speak the alternative language, it will be the children that structure the grammar for that language. So I think it's very interesting that what Chomsky really looked at is children are a lot smarter than we thought they were. And especially in terms of language. Not only do young people, children, have this innate ability to communicate with each other very sophisticatedly in some cases, even if their word choices are not sophisticated. They understand that language has rules and that those rules need to be followed. And sometimes they will overcorrect themselves in terms of how they communicate with one another. But they understand that rules are there for a reason, and they try their hardest to work with those rules. So that's pretty much all I have to say about Chomsky. I really hope this was a lot shorter than some of my other presentations. So again, happy mid-semester break. This week I gave you your exam 2 study guide for exam 2, which is due October 23rd, which covers Piaget to Chomsky. Next week we're going into Vygotsky. Remember, I switched up the units. Check the unit list that I posted for this module, because we're switching it up. Down the road, you have reflection 3 due November 6th, homework 3 due November 20th, reflection paper, the final paper due December 4th. I have received 13 out of 30 responses. I'm shooting for at least 51%. So can I find at least 3 more volunteers? Remember, it's a free homework pass. It's academic money, if you will. It's free academic money. You can apply it to any homework, even one that you have not submitted to me yet. So you can get full credit for an assignment that you haven't even submitted yet, if it's late. You could also use it for a future assignment for either reflection 3 or homework 3. You cannot use it for exams, and you cannot use it for the final reflection paper. By the way, on a side note, if you owe me work, reach out to me. We can negotiate. We can figure out something. Just because you've been MIA for a few weeks, my goal is for you to learn something, and my goal is for you to pass this class. That's my goal. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for me. I want it for both of us. We both benefit by you learning and by you passing. That's also a means of me explaining. I do that with my students all the time. I have students, for whatever reason it may be, whether it's legitimate reasons, whether it's illegitimate reasons. If they've been MIA and they come to me at the end of the semester, I will have a negotiation. I will sit down with them. The example I like to use is the IRS. If you haven't paid your taxes, the IRS isn't like, you don't have to pay your taxes. Just forget it. No, you're going to get somebody to sit down and you're going to negotiate. How can we work this out? How can I get back in good graces? How can we reconcile the fact that I haven't paid my taxes in the last 10 years? What do I have to do? There's going to be a penalty. There's going to be give and take. But you're not irredeemable. There's always redemption at the end. That's what I want to say to any of you out there who still owe work. If you still owe work, talk to me. We can negotiate. We can figure this out. That's all I have to say about that. So this was about a half hour, so I'm actually happy where we've ended up. And enjoy your weekend. And I hope to talk to you soon. See you on GroupMe.